Hi, this is my MVP trophy. I picked up this little piece of hardware when I was a junior in high school. I'd like to tell you all about it in this session that I call Dr. J and the Suicide Drill. Check it out. Hi, folks. I want to share with you some of the lessons I learned when I first embraced Dr. J and the Suicide Drills. Now, the first player I remember really being a fan of for the Philadelphia 76ers, my hometown team, was George McGinnis. George McGinnis was about 6'8" and about 235 pounds. You kind of figure he was like similar to Anthony Mason, but he was a little bit lighter, a little bit faster, and a better offensive player. He had this one-handed pump shot, this jump shot. There was a one-handed pump jumper, and he was really affable. If you interviewed him, he really had something to say. And he took the Sixers from being abysmal at one point, a couple of years before he got here. They were 9 wins and 73 losses during the regular season, and that set the standard for futility in the NBA for decades. And he took them from being a team similar to that to being a playoff contender to being in the playoffs. So I really liked him. And not long after that, Julius Erving came to the team, but I was still a George McGinnis guy. But at that point, it wasn't like today. Like, you heard about Dr. J, you heard about him jumping from the foul line and dunking, you heard about some of his exploits, but there wasn't social media and like the internet, so you really couldn't appreciate his game if you hadn't seen it. And soon, George McGinnis was kind of on the decline, and Julius Erving was ascending, so I got to see a lot more of him, and I really started to appreciate him. I mean, if you interviewed him, he had something to say, not just about sports and athletics, but he was kind of like a philosopher. It seemed like he was very erudite. And then I could appreciate his game. I kind of modeled my jump shot. He had this bank shot I would kind of copy. And then he had the shoes. Before they were Jordans, they were Dr. J's. And I had multiple Dr. J's. I had the poster. There was this poster of him, this San Antonio Spurs player just looking kind of gassed, and Julius Erving was scoring on him. And I had the basketball. So I was really, I was all in at some point on Julius Erving. And around that same time, I remember looking in the newspaper. He was coming to the Palestra, which is a great basketball arena. It's actually a basketball cathedral and on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania. And so I was obsessed with being at this event. As a matter of fact, I was so obsessed, I got there like hours before the place even opened. And at that time, I was like a young teenager. I got there, and around the same time, the employees were entering, and they just let me in, just walk through the place. It was a different time. So I remember seeing Dr. J. I was on the front row. I was just immersed. Everything he said, I was just soaking it up. I was absorbing. And I remember one thing he talked about was intensity on defense, and he had some type of acronym. I think it was like Hilda. Don't ask me what the individual letters stood for. It was something like heightened intensity defense or something similar to that. And I just embraced that so much. And right after that event, it might have lasted an hour, maybe more than likely it was about 90 minutes, but it seemed like it was just, I don't know, time just stood still. But right after that, I went from that event right to my local basketball court, the street ball court. And my court was called AB Day Basketball, or AB Day School. And there were 2 courts, 2 full courts. So it was 4 baskets, but 2 full courts. And one was for the serious players, and the other was for everyone else. So right around this time, I was just getting to the point where I was accepted on the main court. And there was a pickup game like there always was. And I remember getting on the court, and I got my hands up, my eyes wide open, I'm shuffling my feet, I'm saying, Hilda, I'm screaming it. And man, to use some names of comedians of the day, Bill Cosby, Richard Pryor, Flip Wilson, they had nothing on me because I was cracking people up. They were laughing like they had never laughed before, because you just didn't really go all out. That type of intensity wasn't it wasn't really witnessed on the street court like that. That type of earnestness, let's put it that way. It was intense, but it wasn't not like that. So one lesson I learned was that sometimes if you're going to embrace your goals, sometimes you might get laughed at a little bit, but that was fine, because after a while, it didn't last long. After a while, I was on the court. How it works on the street is, you stay on the court until someone beats you, whether it's literally or figuratively, but until you lose, you're on that court. So some of the same people that were laughing, rolling around, they were off the court. So they could do anything they want as long as I was on the court. So another lesson I learned was that we kept winning, and you kind of reach a plateau. What I mean by that is, you know, there were some great things happening. I was feeling really good. As a matter of fact, one player that was laughing, I was guarding him, and the guy trying to throw him the ball said, "Look, he's just too good. You have to." And so I shut him down. He didn't never got the ball. But then, after they got off the court, I remember being matched up with this team that had a guy that he played Division 1A for St. Joseph's at the time, and he was 6'9". I'm about the same height then as I was now. I was 6 feet, and I was about 13, maybe 14. I was a teenager, and I was really no match for this guy. But I mean, he had some weaknesses. I mean, he was a big guy. He wasn't that agile and everything. So when he put the ball on the court, I could steal it and everything. So that kind of annoyed him. So what would happen was that he made some adjustments, because they had to throw him the ball. And after a while, right halfway through the game, he got kind of annoyed, and I could see that, which really made me feel good, because that means I was having an effect. But one thing I didn't adjust for was that something called a cheap shot. I mean, he had the ball really high, and I'm like looking up and guarding him, and he comes down with his elbow right in the collarbone. And speaking of shutdown, that kind of shut me down for the rest of the day. But I mean, I didn't whine, I didn't cry, because that was just part of it. So that's another lesson. You learn sometimes you're gonna have to make an adjustment, and things might not be fair. I mean, I couldn't fight the guy. He was like older, bigger, stronger. So I mean, I just had to accept it. But one thing I did learn is that that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't having an effect. So I kind of took that lesson, kind of watched out for it and made adjustments in the future. But kind of fast forward now to from the street game to the high school game. Now, I'm incorporating all these things. I'm learning. I'm still absorbing everything I can from mostly television, radio, newspapers, or whatever. And I'm getting around, going to different games and things like that. So at our high school team, I went to a small private school. And one thing we did, I mean, we were mediocre, which means we won about half the games we played, which is a kind of a nice way to say we lost about half the games we played. So it was about 50, flip a coin whether we're going to win or lose. So one of the things that I did not like to do was run. I didn't like to, we had these events called suicides. And how that works is you line up at, like, under the basket, there's an end line, and then there's a foul line, half court line, there's another end line. I mean, there's another foul line on the other court, and there's another end line. So what the coach would do, he would blow the whistle. You would run from the end line to the first foul line, touch it, run back, and then do the same thing, half court and the other foul line, and then the other end line, and come back. And depending on how sadistic the coach was, he would just say again and blow the whistle, again and blow the whistle, again. And I really did not like that at all. So I had an attitude that was corresponding to that. I would kind of jog, and then I would complain, I would whine, I would sigh, roll my eyes, I'd shrug my shoulders and everything. Well, being immersed and getting around other players, seeing them, I would emulate everything they would do on the court, but I didn't realize that sometimes that what they did off the court affected what they did on the court. So maybe in this immersion that I was doing, getting around other players with better attitudes and things like that, I learned, well, they did the suicides with no complaining. As a matter of fact, they embraced it. So, one day I said, okay, I'm going to embrace it. Now, I didn't tell all my other teammates, hey, look, man, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to really work hard, because out in the wild, I kind of use an analogy like a lion doesn't say to gazelles or impalas, hey, hey guys, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna, rip you. No, they just hunt. So that's what I did. I mean, I went through all the practice and everything. I did what I had to do. Then when it came time for the suicide drills, I was all in, and I did it. I did it so fast, and everyone. I remember when I was just giving out all 100%. One of the other players who was much quicker than I was, and I'm blowing by him. He said, "Hey man, this is the first one. What are you doing?" And that made me feel good because I was having an effect, and that was actually making the whole team better because I was doing something different. Because if you do the things you've always done, you'll get the things you've always got, and that's why we were mediocre because we just did went through the motions a lot of times in that area. So I remember the coach just looking after I just lapped the whole team. He looked at me and he looked at everyone else and he just kind of looked bewildered. So he blew it and I did it again 2 or 3 times. And then finally he walked over to me and I was just so fired up. I was ready for, I didn't know what he was going to do. So he got like right next to me and he said, "You go to the showers. Everyone else get on the line." He blew the whistle, and I got out of there so fast. And I remember as I was leaving, they were still doing they were still doing the suicide. So, I learned that sometimes if you kind of shift your focus, you shift your attitude, you kind of embrace the thing that if the thing that you don't like, if it still has the ability to get you to where you want to go, maybe you can embrace it and have show a different result. And that was awesome. Now, fast forward once again to uh, later on in that year, and I remember at the awards banquet, and I did not know that I was the MVP. And one of the reasons was because of some of the things I had learned and I adopted and made some changes, and that had an effect on the whole team. I didn't realize that. So that was another lesson I learned. What you do can be impactful not only to you but on the others as well. Now that was my junior year. Now in my senior year, we had a change in coaches. We had this coach he was still part of the school, but he had seen what we were doing and he made some adjustments. I remember him putting like signs all over, things to adjust our attitude, like "you're better than you think you are." And he would like have different quotes and just different things to motivate us. And we went that year from, instead of being mediocre, we went and actually won the championship in my senior year. So a lot of times, if you make small adjustments, they can make big changes. So these are some of the lessons that I learned from embracing some of these things. That number one, you might get laughed at. That's fine. And no one who's ever accomplished anything significant has done so without some type of derision or laughter or criticism. There might be some pain involved. As a matter of fact, you've heard like growing pains. Well, one way or another, there's going to be some discomfort, and that's okay because that's what it takes to move to the next level. Um, and the next thing is that if you make incremental changes, it's going to have big results. Like I think of like guided missiles. Like if there's a missile aimed at a rocket aimed at a plane or something like that, it doesn't just go straight to it. It makes the incremental changes until it locks in, and then boom, it hits its target. And that's the same thing it can be with some of our goals. The last thing I learned was that I said I did not like to run. Right before we had that coaching change, um, I learned that we would have to run. I think it was like a 5 or 6 minute mile in order to uh, maintain our roster spot. And I hated running, but I found out in enough time where I could make some adjustments. So that whole summer, right before my senior year, I just ran. And I ran, and sometimes I made my goal, sometimes I didn't. But when it became time to actually make the team based on that one running exercise, I made the team because I had practiced all summer. And this lesson I learned is that when the pressure's on, a lot of times people don't rise to the occasion. They sink to the level of their highest preparation. Because I had prepared all summer, I really wasn't concerned. Now, if I hadn't have practiced, I wouldn't have been able to achieve my goal. So once again, that last lesson was a pretty good nugget. I just recently learned that from an FBI negotiator, hostage negotiator. But looking back in retrospect, I applied the same thing. So these are some of the lessons I learned from embracing Dr. J and the suicide drills. We'll see you next time.